the first line of defense and offense for the organized left has been the mainstream media and Hollywood. And so we've declared war on them first and foremost because, well, did you see what happened over the last 3 weeks? David Weston is gone, Jeff Zucker is gone, and Jonathan Klein is gone. That is not because the chyrons underneath were in the wrong font. That is not because the color of the hair of the host was off. It wasn't because of ageism. It was because they're liars. And the people that they chose to lie about were the American people, where they falsely framed us as the enemy. So we waited 20 years. We gave you 20 years of warning, starting with Rush Limbaugh. And you didn't listen. And you tried to call him out as the worst thing in the world. And then you went after Matt Drudge and all the people that said, you know what, I'm going to figure out how to do HTML. Well, now my toe could start a website drunk. Okay? We all have the ability now to take these people on. And so when I went to my first Tea Party rally, and as you can tell, I don't have prepared speeches. I kind of wing it. But there's always new information in my head because the week in baseball, the week in inside media baseball is so filled with villainy and treachery that I just go out there and I say, you know what? They're the enemy. And here's why they're the enemy. The first week that I went to defend this group of people who just wanted to espouse their love of country, love of fiscal responsibility and the Constitution, the unfortunately named anchor by the name of Contessa Brewer at MSNBC had an entire segment in which she showed... Does everybody know this story yet? You don't know this story. It's so good because this shows how evil they are. Ooh, I'm not allowed to call them evil. I'm not allowed to call them socialists. Yes, I am, because evil people do this. They had a discussion about the Tea Party and people that were protesting the president. And they showed a guy in Arizona who was flaunting that he was armed at this rally. But what was so strange about this photo is that somehow they used an X-Acto knife to cut his head off in order to have a discussion whether or not these protests, with all the violence that is symbolic in a man carrying his weapon, the Second Amendment, are these protests racist? And the unfortunately named Contessa Brewer continues on. And like, something's wrong here. Why do you have a picture of all the pictures to show? Why do you have this gentleman's head cut off? It doesn't make sense. You have to go out of your way to go get Photoshop or use an X-Acto knife and then scan the photo. It doesn't make sense unless the person that was holding the gun was black. That doesn't go with the narrative. So as they call you racist, they cut off a black man's hat and say that he's racist and somehow that he's white. Then they start saying, we get a message from the White House when you guys start asking questions of your elected representatives. And they didn't like that much because they thought that the mainstream media and the will of that gentleman's charisma, that they were going to socialize 1/7 of our economy. And our patriotic elder statespeople said, nah, it's not going to work out. I understand that you're going to have to cut Medicare, you're going to have to do this and that. We have some questions for you. And because they asked a few basic questions, Barack Obama brought in Andy Stern from the SEIU. Barack Obama brought in Richard Trumka from the AFL-CIO, and they said, what are we going to do? And so the AFL-CIO issued in August, I believe it was about August 5th of 2009, a letter to the rank and file of the AFL-CIO. Get in their faces. What do you mean, my aunt and uncle? My grandmother? My grandfather? Who are asking These people that simply read the bill, and John Conyers says, I'm not going to read 1,000 pages, but that's what organized labor, which got this president elected, and they're the presidents of the United States right now. And I got to be honest with you, I don't like these people very much. And then you got the SCIU, and there were 2 town hall meetings that day, and Jim Messina, who's the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, he said on that day that the AFL-CIO said, get in their faces. Jim Messina said, if they punch you, punch back twice as hard. And do you know what happened that night at those town halls? One in Tampa and one up in Missouri in Russ Carnahan's district. Organizing for America and the SCIU came down there, made sure that none of you got to ask the questions. People in purple shirts bumped their way in, took their seats, did not allow you to ask questions. And as they started to walk out, at the very end of it, the people who wanted to be there to ask the questions were standing out in a silent protest. The SCIU, 2 thugs walked up to a black vendor by the name of Kenneth Gladney, who was holding a Gadsden flag to sell. And they said, what are you doing here? N-word. And they beat the crap out of him. And I went out there and I made it the biggest story on my site, and the mainstream media ignored it because it went against the narrative. Katie Couric ignored it. I said, you know what? This trend is starting to add up here. They are doing to us what they're accusing us of doing. They attack us. They beat us up. They bit off a person's finger in Thousand Oaks, California. The mainstream media played it down. They beat up Kenneth Gladney, and they played it down. They hired the top Democratic lawyers in St. Louis to protect these SCIU thugs who beat him up and called him the N-word, while they continue to call you these names. And so as you watch this juggernaut, a growing juggernaut of the American people saying, you know what? We're not the America that we were the last 20 years. We're a new America. We wasted the last 20 years buying crap. And we're gonna be the America that's going to save this country, and we're going to take on the bullies out there, whether it be the SCIU, the AFL-CIO, ACORN, the president, our corrupt congressmen, and anyone in the Republican Party that doesn't get it. This has been an awakening for us as a country. And I think that the critical point when I realized this thing is heading well beyond what I think even us in the room, well, it's not a room. Okay, God, it's a room, okay. Thank you. In my mind, I realized that the day that they passed that health care bill, they knew that they were stepping into the abyss.